Hey, Anne, such a pleasure to interview you today. And just a quick story about Anne for a moment. We go back to when she was a little toddler, probably the age of her kids now. Her mom and dad helped me with my initial cookbooks. Her dad was an extraordinary editor and her mom a beautiful illustrator. So I thank you because that's how we all came in touch. And to let you know a little bit about Anne, she's the owner of Energy Tree, where she practices acupuncture and Chinese medicine in a beautiful greenhouse-like clinic in the Summerhill neighborhood of Toronto. She's passionate. She's an advocate for reproductive health and normalizing the conversation around fertility, labor, loss, and menstruation. So overcoming our, Anne, why don't you tell us a quick little intro about your story and how you got into this?
So I think the fastest version is thought I was dying at the age of 18. Woke up with a giant dermoid cyst because I'm a raging hypochondriac. My parents didn't listen to me. And it was only when I laid out on the floor, they thought I was trying to get out of going to church, laying down on the floor, like, what is this? And they were like, oh my God. They realized it's real. And found that I had a 10-centimeter dermoid tumor on my ovary.
Oh my God.
So
Give me an idea. How big is that?
So that's like, so
Oh,
I know.
oh my God. Oh my God.
Like a grapefruit.
Okay. What a way to make parents feel guilty.
No, I have a knack for that, Rose.
Yeah. That I know. That I know.
The karma's coming back to me. I'm watching it with my 11-year-old. And so then they removed the ovary, the dermoid, and the fallopian tube, but then said that I'd probably have a very hard time conceiving in the future. And so I would likely need help with any sort of reproductive endeavor. So it became sort of a passion, at first unwilling when I was 18.
And I bet you didn't think, did it really hit you when you were 18? I know my daughter had polycystic ovary syndrome, and she was told this at 14. It didn't mean anything at that time.
I think had it not been so dramatic, then it probably wouldn't have been like if I missed my period all the time because of track when I was in high school and then university, and that didn't bother me. But I think because they actually removed the organs, and the gynecologist was really insistent, like, I really want to set you up. I mean, I'm very grateful for her, Dr. Wade, and she was very clear. You know, you're gonna have a hard time, and I think that was helpful because had she said what a lot of I feel physicians say to my patients, which is, "Don't worry about this now. We'll worry about it when we'll have kids," then I would have taken a very different approach. But instead, she, recommended some proactive recommendations of, why don't you see a naturopath? Why don't you go see a nutritionist? Figure out how to balance hormones and give yourself, the best chance possible. So
And to cut to the chase, tell us about your family today.
I have 5 children.
Amazing. All naturally.
all naturally. I've had 5 miscarriages, but that was just part of the journey.
Yeah.
And then I'm pregnant with my 6th.
And this is it for you? That is it for you?
I mean, there's like a timeline that I feel like my eldest right now sat me down.
Said, Mom, that's enough.
I don't want to be a teenager taking care of babies.
Oh my God. And she's how old? 11?
She's 11.
Okay, so when an 11-year-old already talks to us like that, I think we got to listen, right?
I listen to her pretty much since the age of 7 because she's very intimidating.
Very mature. So, and I mean, my whole world is food, fitness, supplements, health. So what I'd like to get into in the few minutes we have here, give me some idea of how food and fertility affect women and men. And we forget about those guys at times.
It's true. So I get asked a lot about the ideal fertility diet. To which I reply that, in Chinese medicine, there isn't an ideal for any one person. There's ideals for different types of people. So And listening to your own cues is very important. So, for example, if you are able to eat gluten and you tolerate it well,
Eat it.
Eat it.
Right.
And I really recommend that people follow their own path by, within reason. Obviously, like excess sugar, bad fats,
Right.
Over processing of food.
Yeah. Actually what everybody should be doing, right?
Exactly. Is never good. But the idea of making sure that you have, a lot of fresh food from scratch, food made by Rose.
Right. Like in other words, no eliminating. I never believe in eliminating entire food groups.
Unless you know it's a problem. So,
right.
For example, if I were to like celery juice, for example, is a fad.
I agree.
And so I've had celery juice on occasion, and each time have felt wretched, like very bloated and uncomfortable.
Really?
And there's, it's very high on the FODMAP diet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of undigestible starches.
Right.
So, if you already have issues with like a gut bacterial imbalance, it's just going to exacerbate that.
Right.
So, in instance where some people say, oh, well, everybody could benefit from celery.
Right.
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
I just make a note, okay, avoid this.
Right.
And then keep trying other foods and just being cognizant of what you put into yourself and then what you get out.
And what about the whole theory today of high fat dairy versus lower fat in terms of fertility?
I think that is important to a degree. I think what's more important is probably where you're getting your dairy from.
Right.
Because if it is like, for example, a grass-fed organic dairy,
mm-hmm.
have more conjugated linoleic acid, so CLA,
right.
Which is anti-inflammatory.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're having just, a pasteurized dairy that you're getting from like a regular conventional source,
mm-hmm.
then you might be also getting hormones
mm-hmm.
that wouldn't necessarily be ideal, as well as like antibiotics.
Right.
So I'd say it's less about high fat, low fat, and more about source.
Right. Okay. And of course, organic always better, not always affordable. Now, does this apply to men also, or are there specific guidelines for men that are different than women?
So in terms of food, I really try to encourage the same idea just of how you feel when you eat certain foods. Obviously, again, within reason. But with men, I'm more concerned about lifestyle habits. So, being on or spending copious amounts of time on your Peloton and taking hot baths and
right.
Having any type of THC or
mm-hmm.
product. CBD is totally fine, but THC actually seems to have an effect on the motility of sperm. So
interesting.
Limit that.
mm-hmm.
And I always encourage them, in the future you can have this again, but while you're
of course. But what about the biking? Because I know a lot of friends of my kids. I mean, they're all bikers. They're all concerned about this now that they're it seems like everybody around seems to be having fertility issues today, Anne.
Yes. So I noticed that too.
Yeah, thus and Matthews and Energy Tree.
With all of the Pelotoning and the weed smoking and the bang.
Right.
Right.
Right. Way more.
Life. It's ruined fertility.
Mm-hmm.
So outdoor cycling doesn't seem to have the same effect as indoor cycling, which makes sense simply from like, a ventilation standpoint.
Oh, interesting.
Because the way that it affects sperm quality is the higher temperature of the testicles, typically the worse the morphology.
Okay.
And morphology affects how the sperm
yes.
into the egg.
Right.
Because it's the shape, if you will, of,
right.
Head and tail.
Right.
And the head is what we really care about.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell a lot about motility and forward progression.
Right.
From like motility, parameters, as opposed
right.
to looking at the like morphology for that.
So I mean, and when you talk about fertility today, I know my latest book, which was based on Canada's guideline, I really like in terms of the guideline now, is because they are pushing people towards a more plant-based diet than red meat. You know, dairy and meat no longer are categories. They're saying eat tons and tons of fruits and vegetables, whole grain. So it all makes sense. This is a diet for everybody, right?
Yes. I will say it's important if you have PCOS
Right.
to focus more on protein and fiber.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to steer them away from too much fruit.
Okay.
Because that has an effect on insulin levels.
Mm-hmm.
And you're wanting to make sure that your insulin level remains regular.
Okay.
It's really important too that you pay attention to foods that are on the insulin index as opposed to the glycemic index, and
Mm-hmm.
vary quite a bit. Because, for example, if you were to look at the glycemic index, dairy would be quite low, but if you're looking
Right.
at the insulin index, it's quite high. So
Okay.
that's what matters in that particular condition.
And where can people go and to find this information out on specific foods?
So it's tricky. There are some very good books that you can get. I would recommend, however, because a lot of the time, unless this is your specialty, you're not going to be able to understand fully what you're reading.
Right.
I know for myself, like I've been focusing on this for over 10 years, and even sometimes I have to reference
Okay.
reference. So I would recommend probably going to a qualified acupuncturist or naturopath.
Right.
Create the more ideal plan for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I would probably opt for that over a dietitian, unless the dietitian focuses on fertility.
Right. Right. It's a little bit like asking your GP, and it's, with due respect to GPs, about diet. You really need to have a specialist. Okay, so what about supplements now for men and for women? Do you recommend, are we taking too much over the counter?
So I think that supplements are very important, provided that they are the right ones. And there's a lot of really good options, but there's a lot of really bad options as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important, again, that you get advice on, your specific condition. Because, for example, with a PCOS patient, I have a lot of polycystic ovarian patients who are very young, and for
Right.
them, I'm not as concerned about, for example, egg quality. So I'm not
Right.
going to be providing them supplements with as much focus on antioxidants.
Right.
I'm going to be focusing more on balancing their insulin levels, lowering their testosterone.
Right.
But for men, just generally, I would focus on high antioxidants. And so mostly you can get that through food and whole
Mm-hmm.
food, but you can also benefit from a very basic regime, especially if you don't have a lot of meat.
Right.
L-arginine is really important.
Mm-hmm.
I recommend around 2 grams of that.
So, sorry about that.
No problem.
Mm-hmm.
C, 2,000 milligrams, just to help improve how liquid the semen is,
Mm-hmm.
which is important, obviously, when it needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
And vitamin E I like these ones because they're inexpensive, they're easy to get.
Right.
And I feel like they're not a tough pill to swallow.
And very cute. And they say more iron, folic acid, of course, and B12.
So I actually don't focus on iron for men.
Okay.
Simply because they're at a higher risk of getting excess iron, because they don't lose iron unless they're, very avid athletes.
Right.
B12, yes, if they don't have any animal protein in their diet. And for folic acid, I prefer actually the more absorbable form of methylfolate.
Mm-hmm.
Methylfolate actually converts into folic acid, and some people don't convert as quickly or as well.
Okay.
Like an 85% conversion rate. For men, that doesn't matter as much, but for women, especially leading up to conception, it's very important that you're fully absorbing your folate.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And in terms of fitness, now I know, because I can be honest here, Anne has seen members of my family with great success. And I know one of my children, she was working out very, very hard. and she couldn't conceive, and you had her lessen the intensity of her working out, and she got pregnant. So tell us a little bit about fitness before getting pregnant for men and for women, because again, we just forget about those guys, right?
Rose, I'll say before anything that you're like the godmother of fitness.
Yeah.
I will never forget coming to your house and you coming out from your gym in the middle of the day. And I was just like, my mother would never.
Oh my God. Well, I remembered, and not to say this is for all women, maybe I was crazy, Anne, but I had 4, thank God, successful pregnancies without problems in terms of, carrying. I ran until the day I was in labor. Now, people would say that's nuts, but my doctor then believed whatever you were doing before, continue, and I was having no issues. But I have to tell you, I got back into shape so quickly. Like it was great. So I do think we always want people to do something for sure, but let us know what's too much, too little.
No, I think that that's really important, especially a lot of the women that I deal with in terms of recurrent loss or miscarriage have issues with circulation. And so exercise is extremely important. I also really think it's important because one of the newer theories for recurrent loss is actually that the immune system attacks the developing embryo. So it's almost important to incorporate some form of immunotherapy with those particular patients. And exercise is the original immunotherapy.
Wow.
It suppresses your immune system, not to a level where you are obviously catching, colds or having increased risk of disease, but that it's constantly lowering your immune system and then increasing it, which gives the little developing embryo an opportunity to actually continue to develop into a fetus. So that's exercise from that standpoint is really important. For certain patients, it's very dependent on the patient. I really encourage like endometriosis patients, again, because of the immunotherapy effects of exercise, and because there's a new theory coming out that endo is actually more of an autoimmune disease than it is a reproductive disorder.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, because they're finding actually endometriosis in men.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
That I've never heard of that.
Yeah, endometrial tissue, it's not the same thing as endometriosis. And so it's not, people always think that endometriosis is the lining of the uterus.
Right.
Traveling.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of this like medieval idea, but like they used to tell women, don't make sure that you don't go into like an upside down position when you're of your period, because that could lead to endometriosis, which is so funny because now we know that it's not the same tissue at all, and that the idea of that is insane.
The old wives' tales, right? The old wives' tales still haunt us.
Exactly. And they found actually in autopsies of stillborn children endometriosis. So which is a bit of a downer, but also very interesting because they never would have had a chance to develop reproductive organs.
Oh my goodness.
In the way that they're actually functioning. Yes.
And for men, in terms of fitness, often too much is not good either, or?
In terms of men, too much is not so much an issue as it is what type of fitness. Again, making sure that you're keeping cool is very important. So not like encapsulating your testicles in, tighter bike shorts or wearing too many layers.
Right.
Important.
Okay.
It's also more preferred if they're able to use weights at least in 50% of their activities, because it helps with it helps with just testosterone and boosting your testosterone, as opposed to just copious amounts of cardio where it's increasing cortisol levels.
I mean, is it detrimental to be doing marathons and that? I know I get asked that by some men.
I don't think so. Unless, if they're rounding out their fitness and making sure that they're eating properly. Then it should be absolutely fine. It increases, obviously, like oxidation in the body when you're really over exercising. But I find that the athletes who are doing marathons typically have just a general healthier lifestyle overall.
Yes.
Counteracts that potential damage.
Right.
Because then it's easy to make the argument that, well, I might as well just sit on the couch and smoke.
And do nothing.
No, that's much worse.
And just to sum it up, because I know you don't have a lot of time, you're busy at your clinic, stress. So you cannot tell a woman who's trying to get pregnant or going through in vitro or had a miscarriage, don't be stressed. You know, that's not the way you're going to get pregnant. What do you do about telling women about stress when it's just a natural, and how much does stress play a part?
So I always really emphasize that it is not anything I want them to focus on. It's something that I'll focus on for them.
That's great.
Because I've been to other professionals before who have told me, you just need to reduce your stress.
Relax, right? My mother used to say, relax, Rosie, you'll be fine. The worst thing you can be told.
That way. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, I always joke around that with my type A patients that we get along so well because we're the same. And so
yeah, you are a type A, my dear. That I know.
Hypocritical for me to tell them to just chill out.
Exactly. One type A talking to another, I get it. But I think that's very important, because you can't tell them not to stress. They are who they are. They can try the, meditation, yoga, you can try. And if that helps, I think that's great. Yeah. But telling somebody not to be stressed is hard.
No, it increases their stress. I have someone who come and say, this is never going to happen for me because I don't know how to decrease my stress. So you come up with other strategies. Like there are good supplements. Acupuncture is helpful. Exercise is very important.
I think the whole package, to me, the whole package is eating well, exercise, trying to develop habits that help our mental state. I think that's the answer to trying to reduce stress.
I totally agree.
And I want to thank you. If there's any parting words you can give us, that would be great. And I'm so looking forward to seeing people's response to this interview.
You know what, Rose? I'm just really thrilled to be on here with you.
Oh my God, it brings back how many years?
I've been name dropping you forever.
Oh my God. And Anne's been, played in my yard. We played in her yard, dogs and the whole work. She played with my kids, and it's amazing. Yeah, absolutely.
I use every day.
And good luck with your baby. It's very exciting news.
Thank you, Rose.
And any parting words, Anne, or you've given us a lot of information in a short time.
I think that if you are wanting any further information, it's easy to find me.
Yeah.
Instagram, that's probably where you can get the most information. I have a lot of stories where I include research as opposed to opinion.
Yeah, it's actually fascinating. You suggest Instagram and Facebook, or Instagram more?
Mostly, I do include it on Facebook, but I'd say Instagram is a better source.
Yeah. And website, I notice it says coming. So you're building your website, or you're updating it?
Yeah, we're updating it simply because we're going to start having more practitioners at the clinic, and so
great.
Be about.
Oh my God. And I wish you well. You don't need any luck at all. You're a delight, and you're magical in what you do. So I thank you for you bringing this to so many couples and people today in times of, these kind of stressors, for sure.
Thank
you, Anne.
Thank you for having me.
Take care. Bye-bye.